Hi there, good afternoon. I'm so happy to see you. It's another Thursday, coming in a little bit early. I've been doing that lately. I'm going to set my timer actually so we don't go over. We know just exactly how much time we have because I want to go through the portion because we are coming. Now, these are really a big part of my favorite parts of the Bible to talk about. And so, my theme is the future begins now. And this exactly talks about, I believe, our future and our identity of who we are now. So you're lamnetwork.tv. Welcome to the program. If you're new, welcome. I'm so happy to see you. If you're one of the more regular viewers, I think you're going to really like this today because I love it when the person sharing loves what they're sharing the most. And so you're getting into something that I find to be very prophetic and very profound in terms of identity. And as an attachment specialist, if you're new, that's what I do. Identity is a very massive part of attachment. We need to understand who we are so we know what to do, how to think about things, and how to view things and how to feel things. And there's no way to know who we are except who the Father says we are, not who we say we are, not who other people say we are. Who does the Father say we are? And it's implicit in the fact that you're his creation and his peculiar precious treasure, that your identity is as a child of God. And that is no small thing. And that makes you so valuable. And this is value that you embody by the fact that your creator is so incredible and loves you so much and is so proud of you. And human beings are miracles. And here we are in Hanukkah, and today is the fifth day, which now for me personally, I go with five. This would be breathing, breath, grace, right? Breath. And the Torah is a living, breathing document. When I say breathing, I mean it is alive and it gives us it breathes the breath of life into our nostrils and it brings us to life. And so here we are in Hanukkah. Let's enjoy this. I'm going to do things a little differently today. I can't help myself. I have got to read the whole portion today, and I love this portion. Let's just get started. And I want to share something with you that I think is really, really exciting. Okay, it's Miketz. It's our Torah portion today. Now I'm going to nutshell it for you. And then I'm even going to go back a little bit prior to this portion just to give it a little bit of context because I think I want to build on this and these things go together, right? So the portions are segmented for a yearly cycle of reading the Torah. And of course, we have the Brit Hadashah and the New Testament writings. We have the Haftarah. We have the prophets, whatever. So we go through this in a yearly cycle. But sometimes there's just cuts that I feel like we need to combine a little to get some of our context. And context is really everything, right? You can say or think, and you can say anything. And if it's taken out of context, it can cause damage, right? So no matter what it is, we really need to understand the Torah in its context. We might not know every detail. We might not understand every word or every phrase. I mean, there's so much knowledge. We could get bogged down with feeling like a failure that we don't know all this stuff. But if we understand the general context, that the Father loves you, is with you to restore you, and that He's a good parent, everything else comes together. Even when you don't understand it, you can say, well, I don't really understand that, but I know I have a good parent who is here to restore me. Okay. Because He benefits from the relationship too. He made you because He wanted you, right? So you're wanted. Okay. So let's nutshell it real quickly. And then I want to kind of go in with where I've never heard anyone teach this or anything. So I might be wrong here. I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not saying I'm following this right. This is not something I've learned from anybody else. So you're just going to make of that what you will, and you do your own research and study. But I'm going to share something that to me is a very strong point to be made. So here we're talking about Joseph, right? So in Judaism, really, there's that Messiah ben Yosef, which is a suffering servant, and the Messiah ben David, which will come as that reigning king. Okay, so here we are. We're in Hanukkah. We're thinking about that servant candle, but we're talking about Joseph, who really embodies that messianic idea. Now, what happens in this week's portion is when Joseph's like has been put in prison again. He's been incarcerated, and this is where he gets out of being in prison. Okay. And this is where you have Pharaoh's dream. Remember Pharaoh, if you're new, but don't, if I say remember, I'm not, assuming everybody knows everything here. But this is where the Pharaoh had this dream of these 7 fat cows. They were swallowed up by these 7 lean cows, if you can remember that. And then he also has a dream of like 7 ears of corn that were really robust and fat, and they were swallowed up by these, spindly, not like lean ears. And so what happens is Joseph is able to interpret that dream. And what he understands, and God gives him this interpretation that this would be 7 years of plenty that are going to be followed up by 7 years of hunger. And what he does is he tells Pharaoh how to handle this. He has a solution, right? And he gives him the idea to store the grain during these times when there's a lot of fruit in the land, bearing fruit, grain, and everything. And to store that so that during the lean times, they'll have it. And so what he does is he gives Joseph the power to be like the governor. Okay, so he's like the one that would govern and be second in command to Pharaoh, right? And of course, in Egypt, Pharaoh was like God, right? Considered God. So he also gives him his daughter Asenath to marry, right? Potiphar's daughter. And they have 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And of course, then the famine ensues, and throughout the region, for many hours journey. I don't know if this was worldwide, but to them it was the worldwide, right? Because this was the centralized part of the world where all of this is written. And the only way for anybody to get food is to go to Egypt. And then, of course, you have Joseph's brothers. Remember, they threw him in the pit. Remember that, right? That's the whole family drama. Well, 10 of his brothers come to get food to Egypt. They come to Egypt, but they leave Benjamin at home with their father Jacob. And if you remember, do you remember Jacob wanted Rachel and worked 7 years for her, got deceived and married Leah and had children with her. But later in life, Rachel finally conceives that second to the last child, Joseph, and then has Benjamin, and she dies during childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. Okay, so there's Rachel, right? So and Rachel was Jacob's like truest love, right? And so Joseph and Benjamin were very special to Jacob. They're strongly special. So Benjamin is the only one that Jacob thinks he has left of Rachel. And so the brothers were like, so of course, Jacob's like, you're not taking Benjamin, you go, but leave him here. Like he has to have, because it was no small thing to jump on your animal or by foot or whatever and try to make it like during a famine. So Joseph knows his brothers when he sees them on sight. Like he acknowledges in his heart privately that these are his brothers. But because he's been in Egypt so long, his looks have changed enough. They don't know that it's Joseph. They don't see, and of course they think he's probably died. Like they sold him into slavery, and they're probably not even thinking he's alive. Or certainly they don't think he's the governor of the most powerful political system on the planet at that time, right? So what he does was, so Joseph's like pulling out some strategy here. He actually labels them as spies. He sends this accusation against them. And what he does is he says, okay, you bring Benjamin, your younger one, back. Like he knew he had another brother. And he's like, you bring him back and you're going to prove that you are who you say. And then what he does, Simeon goes into prison as like, holding him back as collateral. And but Joseph's like loves his brothers, right? And as we read the portion, he's gives them the ransom and everything. But Jacob, of course, doesn't want to release. He does not want to release Benjamin. But Benjamin, here's where Judah comes in. Judah, the fourth son, right? Who had in contentious relationship with Joseph, right? I mean, the other brothers did, but this is Judah, right? They said that he has to assume, this is what Jacob says, that he has to take on the responsibility for him. Like, you are this, I'm in trust. So he entrusts Benjamin, Rachel's last child, to Judah. And of course, when they're all together, Joseph is benevolent toward them. He lets Simeon out of jail and he brings them to dinner. And of course, I'm going to read that, what he puts them in their order, whatever. But what does he do? He puts his they call it the divining cup. I don't know what this cup was, but the special cup, very specific to Joseph. And he hides it in Benjamin's satchel. Okay. And so, of course, the brothers are leaving. And then Joseph sends people out to search them. They find this goblet, for lack of a better word here. There's three saying it's a goblet. So this is where Joseph's like, okay, you can go free and just leave Benjamin. Okay, that's where it ends. Now, I'm going to go back in time a little bit because I want to set this up because I want to talk about Joseph and Benjamin. Now, Joseph separated from the family. Jacob's been traumatized by what he thinks is the death of his son. Joseph is a very special child, and so he's very upset. And so you have this idea that I want to put together here Benjamin and Joseph, and I want you to really to grasp what I want to share. Because Benjamin is an enigma to a lot of people. But for me personally, I have never found him to be an enigma. I find him to be a connector. And this is really interesting. So if we go back, so the Torah portion is like 41, but I want to go back to 40 in Genesis. And it talks about the baker and the cupbearer. So if you remember that, just let me read this, okay? Okay, so sometime later, because we're all in order here, but we won't go further back, but here we go. It says, the king's cupbearer and baker offended their master, the king of Egypt. I think this is the ESV version. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. And he imprisons them in the house of the captain of the guard, which is the same prison where Joseph was confined. So other people's offenses brought attention to Joseph. Interesting. And he became their personal attendant. Okay, so there's kind of like this brackish water here where he's their personal attendant. These are people that were high up, had gotten in trouble, and here in their confinement, he attends to them. After they had been in custody for some time, both of these men, the Egyptian king's cupbearer and baker, who were being held in the prison, they had a dream on the same night. And each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were distraught. And he asked the officials of Pharaoh who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so downcast today?" "We both had dreams," they replied, "but there is no one to interpret them." Because when two people have the same dream, you're like, what does this mean? But they didn't know. They didn't have the wisdom or the ability to understand what it meant. Then Joseph said to them, don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Now, Joseph loved the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so he's crediting God as this interpreter. So he's humble. He's like, why would you know? God is the one that knows. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. And he says, in my dream, there was a vine before me. And on the vine, there were 3 branches. As it budded, its blossoms opened and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into his cup, and placed the cup in his hand. Then Joseph replies, and he says, this is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore your position. You will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you did when you were his cupbearer. But when it goes well for you, please remember me and show me kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh, that he might bring me out of this prison. For I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing for which they should have put me in this dungeon. So he knows he doesn't belong to be in there. He was falsely accused. He shouldn't be there in the first place. Right? So remember me. Okay. When the chief baker saw the interpretation was favorable, the story is already telling you what you need to know, right? He says to Joseph, I too had a dream. There were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the top basket were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. And so here's Joseph's reply. He says, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree. Then the birds will eat the flesh of your body. Not a favorable interpretation, but an accurate one. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, the day this alleged God was born, right? I don't believe he's God. I say alleged because they believed it. He held a feast for all his officials, and in their presence he lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. Pharaoh restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But Pharaoh hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had described to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph, and he had forgotten all about him. Okay, there's that story of some seemingly, it doesn't seem insignificant because it's weird that he's attending them, and Pharaoh had found, for whatever reason, that the person that was guilty, the person that needed to get hung, was the baker, and Joseph had interpreted that dream. Okay, so it leads us into this week's portion. Now bear with me, because this is about a cup that brought something good because he was restored to his position. And he was like, I'll tell you the dream, remember me, right? So we get to Genesis 41. Now let's just read the portion here. After 2 years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and behold, there came up out of the Nile. Okay, before I start this, let me just say this. After two, now the word there is days, right? And then also says years. Years and days, right? So it's almost like that dream. After 2 days, we see Joseph gets lifted up as the cupbearer, right? Like he gets lifted, right? But let me just keep going. So behold, there came out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed on the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows that were ugly and thin came up out of the Nile after them and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly thin cows who ate up the 7 attractive plump cows. And Pharaoh awoke after that happened, right? After he saw that in his dream. And he fell asleep and he dreamed a second dream. A second time in one night, right? So he fell asleep and he has this dream. He says, behold, 7 years of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk, and behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. How interesting. The east had damaged the wind from the east. Okay, that's really interesting. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So obviously they're saying this seemed really real to Pharaoh. So in the morning, his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. Because he's like, oh, who could I bring in that would accurately interpret this, right? When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in custody, and the house of the captain of the guard, we dreamed on the same night, he and I each having a dream with its own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. Now, they immediately went and got Joseph, and after he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, gotten presentable to look like an Egyptian, right? Like, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh, so this kind of was interesting because he changes his appearance to be presentable for Pharaoh. So changing your appearance in that way, I think that's kind of interesting. It's kind of telling me there's something happening. And Pharaoh says to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now, here's what Joseph says. It is not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Okay, so here's Joseph. He's prophesying. He's like, first of all, this is not me. This is God. And you will, when you tell me, you will get a favorable answer. Now, remember, the cupbearer is telling this story in detail. He's saying, I got a favorable answer. The baker did not. And it came to pass equally to Joseph's interpretation. Like, that's what happened. And so Pharaoh says to Joseph, behold, in my dream, that's interesting because he credits God, but says, but God is going to interpret your dream, and if you're going to get a favorable answer. He just already knows that. So he goes, behold, in my dream, I was standing on the banks of the Nile, and he describes about the everything that the dream that we already read. And let's get to Joseph's response here. Because here we go. Okay. Oops. My goodness. I'm sorry. That is loud. Make sure I shut this off. Oh, sorry. Forgot to do that. Okay. Now here's what he does. Okay. So Joseph says to Pharaoh, after he hears the dream about the cows and the ears of corn, he says, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. So they both are the same thing. So basically one's confirming the other, right? God has revealed to Pharaoh. Now, he's very specifically saying that his God has revealed to this little g God, like that he has told him this, right? He has revealed to him that what he is about to do. He has given him warning of what's going to happen. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. It is, as I told Pharaoh, God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them, there will arise 7 years of famine, and all of the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Like, you got it twice because, like, it's a sure thing, and it's coming soon. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish throughout the famine. And then what happens is this proposal was very pleasing to Pharaoh and all his servants. And so Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command." So he's the attendant to his people. You see how that worked out? "Only as regards to the throne will I be greater than you. You're second to me." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand, and he puts it on Joseph's hand. And he clothes him in garments of fine linen and puts a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And they called out before him, "Bow the knee." Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." That's pretty emphatic, like governorship or whatever. And so he calls him Zaphanath-Paneah. So and that's another, please listen to Hidden Face. Like, please go and listen to Bill Cloud teach about this. He does a beautiful job on this. He has a teaching that is so life-changing, I feel like, on this particular part about the name and everything. And of course, he gives in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, who is the priest. So that's interesting, because this tells me that Pharaoh is having a change of heart. I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like he might be switching gods, right? So Joseph went out because this marriage, you take on that god, that man's god, that's a wife, right? So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Okay, now when he was 30 years old, he enters the service of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh. He went through all the land of Egypt. So he does all the things, does everything Joseph said. He produces abundantly. He gathers everything up. He puts the food in the cities. In every city, there was food, right? Because of Joseph. He stores up the grain in abundance like the sands of the sea until he ceased to measure it, for it couldn't even be measured. So when it said there'd be plenty, God was not kidding. He really made this abundant. This wasn't just like regular. This was incredible. Can you imagine Pharaoh and everybody going, "This is what Joseph said would happen." And literally the earth is yielding 7 times the amount that it normally would. And this wise man knows how to store it. And this is incredible. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. So during this time of plenty, he has the daughter with Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, born to him. And the firstborn is Manasseh, for he said, "God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house." So for a period of time, he was absorbed into Egyptian way of life, and not the God, but their way of life. And he felt better, and he didn't think about his family at home. That to me is very symbolic and very interesting. The name of the second child is Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So where he was imprisoned is also where he'll find his blessing. That's what he names his children. So children their names had meaning, not just like a name we enjoy. It was very specific and special, right? My Hebrew name is Raphaela, which means to heal and to cure. And I don't take that lightly, right? That's important to me and it means something. So it's really important. Our Hebrew names are really important. Now, the 7 years of plenty had occurred in the land of Egypt. It came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come as Joseph had said. So, of course, there's famine everywhere except in the land of Egypt because the famine wasn't there because they had bread. So, when everybody was famished, they cried for Pharaoh for bread. Everybody was starving and hungry. So what do? They turned to the massive governor, the big governor. They turned to Pharaoh. Okay. So Pharaoh took all of the plenty and stored it himself so he could ration it out. But he says, go to Joseph. What he says to you, do. That's good leadership, right? Go to the wise one who knew all this stuff. He'll know how to handle this. So when the famine had spread all over the land, Joseph opens the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land, and all the earth came, and moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe all over the earth. So it says that twice. Now, Jacob learns that there's grain for sale in Egypt. So he said to his sons, why do you look at one another? And he said, behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. So he's like, hey, what are you guys talking about? That's interesting. He's like, hey, what are you guys talking about? He's like, well, there's grain for sale. Go down and buy grain for us there, and we will live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. Jacob did not send Benjamin, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Okay, we already read that. We already talked about that. So the sons of Israel, so it says thus, and now it gives them another label, another title. It says, thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So famine was in Israel, and the sons of Israel went to Egypt to get their needs met. Now, Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold all the people of the land. He sold the grain to them. And Joseph's brothers came and they bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Remember the dream that Joseph had? Like, you're all going to bow before me? Well, there you go. Prophecy, check. Joseph saw his brothers and he recognizes them, but he treats them like strangers. And he speaks roughly to them. Where do you come from? Now, he had forgotten his father's house, he says, right? And they said, from the land of Canaan, to buy food. So they were honest, right? And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams he had had about them, and he said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land, to find our weaknesses, right? And they said to him, no, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies. Interesting, because Joseph had spied on them, but then they falsely put him in the pit and pretended he was dead, right? But they never knew what happened to him. He says to them, no, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see. Now, here's what's interesting. You've come to see the weakness of the land. Now, here's Joseph, the strength. But he named his children after the pain of being afflicted. And he named his children out of the joy of just not even thinking about that family because it hurt so much. Joseph is revealing through his children's names his weakness, his pain, right? And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers. Now, they didn't say 11 because one died. They actually said 12, they acknowledged him, right? The sons of, now they do say it later, but the sons of one man in the land of Canaan, and behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, that would be him, right? It is, as I said to you, you are spies. So there's a third time he says, I deny who you say you are, at least to you. You're spies. You've come to find the weakness in this land. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Like, do you have another brother at home? Because you're just wayward people. Out here, he's saying that he knows who they are. You're just wayward spies out to check it out. You're telling me you've got a settlement somewhere and there's like another kid? No. And let him bring your brother okay, so he says, let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. Is there truth in you? Or else by the life of Pharaoh. So he's invoking what gives him authority. He says, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. On the third day, okay, think of the dream, think of the words third day. There's just so much to unpack here. Joseph says to them, do this and you will live. For I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households, because that's a big job, right? And bring your youngest brother to me. Here's what's interesting. He says, I fear God. So he gives them some hope and a reason that he'll treat them fairly because he fears God. So he says, you're going to bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. So he wanted to know if there was truth in them. And they're like, there is death in us. He begged us to let him out and we didn't listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. Like, karma is not fun, right? Like, this has come back. We've reaped what we sowed. And Reuben answers and he says, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you didn't listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. So isn't that funny? He actually totally knows what they're saying. They're just having this conversation. They don't know he even knows. Then he turned away from them and he wept because he was testing them, and the truth was coming out that they still remembered him, that they were acknowledging, they like listened to him screaming and crying and left him there, and that they deserve this. So he turns, he doesn't let them see, and he weeps. And he returns to them. I just think of Yeshua wept, right? What is he weeping for? Not just the sin of mankind, the reckoning of the pain of the sin of mankind, right? And he returned to them and he spoke to them. He took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and replace every man's money in his sack and give them provisions for the journey. And this was done for them. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw the money in the mouth of the sack. And he says to his brothers, my money has been put back here in the mouth of my sack. At this, their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? Now, where we read something in prophecy, it talks about men's hearts failing them. That's a connection I make. That's a data point. But he says, what is this that God has done to us? So they're very curious. They think something significant is happening. God is doing something. When they came to Jacob, their father in the land of Canaan, they told him all that happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, we are honest men. We had never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me. Take the grain for the famine of your households and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I will know you're not spies. So they're telling him the whole story, and then I'll release your brother. You can go and trade in the land. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw all their bundles of money, they were like afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. Then Reuben said to his father, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands and I will bring him back to you. Okay, Reuben is saying, no matter what, I promise you, I will bring Benjamin back. And he says, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he is the only one left. Of course, from Rachel. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you were to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. So, wow. So it talks about the famine being bad, and when they had eaten the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father says, okay, go again, buy us a little food. But Judah says to him, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Okay, we have to bring Benjamin. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Israel said, why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? And they replied, the man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we be in any way know that he would say, bring your brother down? And Judah says to Israel the father, send the boy with me. Now remember, Judah and Benjamin have a special relationship. We have the northern and the southern kingdom. And the southern kingdom is Benjamin, little Benjamin, and big Judah. Right? And these brothers are together. So he says, send them with me, and we shall arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. That's huge. Remember that. If we had not delayed, we would have already returned twice. And the father Israel says to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother and arise. Go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you the mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother, Benjamin. Remember that. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So the men took this present. They took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his steward of his house, "Bring the men into the house, slaughter an animal, and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." So the man does as Joseph told him to do, brought him the men to Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. And they said, "It is because of the money which was replaced in our sacks." They're like, they're going to think we stole it or whatever, right? "That we were brought in so that he may assault us and fall upon us to make us servants and seize our donkeys." So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house and they spoke with him at the door of the house. "Oh, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food. And when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the mouth of the sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it again with us." We brought it back, like we're returning it, like what you've given us for the journey, like, here, take it. "We have brought other money down with us to buy food. We do not know who put the money in our sacks." He replied, "Peace to you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you." So when I say I believe they knew God was involved or there was something significant that God was doing, I think they deep down knew this. But here's that confirmation that this was treasure placed by their God for them, right? Then he brought Simeon out to them. And when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, and when he had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they should eat bread there. So when Joseph comes home, they brought into the house to him the present they had brought with them, and they bowed down to him to the ground. And he inquired about their welfare and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" And they said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. They prostrated themselves again, bowing again, right? And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin. So again, we have lifting of the eyes, expecting something good, right? His mother's son. And he said, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son." Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he saw a place to weep. Okay, this massive thing is happening. To unpack all this is probably going to be part 1. And we're probably going to need a part 2, a whole hour to discuss some of the ramifications I find in here. "And he entered his chamber and he wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. Controlling himself, he said, 'Serve the food.' They served him by himself, and they themselves and the Egyptians who ate with them by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth." So he put them in their birth order. "And the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs." Today, the 5th candle, I want to tell you who I think Benjamin is. They drank and were merry with him. And then he commanded the steward of the house, "Fill the men's sack with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, with his money for grain." And he did as Joseph told him. And as soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. They had gone only a short distance from the city. Joseph said to his steward, "Up, follow these men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good? It is not from this that my Lord drinks. Is it not from this, this cup, that my Lord drinks? And by this that he practices divination? You have done evil in doing this." So practicing divination, we'll talk about that another time, but I would say that would be in touch with power of some sort, but that's another thing to look at and go through those words. But when he overtook them, he spoke to them these words. They said to him, "Why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servant to do such a thing. Behold, the money that we found at the mouth of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Whichever your servant is found with it shall die, and we will also be my Lord's servants. And he said, let it be as you say. He who is found with it shall be my servant, and the rest of you shall be innocent. Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opens the sack, and he searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, the youngest. Then they tore their clothes, every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. And when Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell before him to the ground. Joseph said to them, what deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can indeed practice divination? Okay, bear with me. And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are the Lord's servants, both we and he also, in whose hand the cup has been found. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. Okay, that's the portion. I wanted to read the whole thing because it's so important, because I want to talk about who Benjamin is. And I want to start touching on this because it talks about Rachel still weeping for her children. Okay, now we talked about the southern kingdom, which is Benjamin and Judah. Now, when we read on to next week's portion, we figure out that Judah is the one that says, take me instead of Benjamin. Just take me. This will destroy my father. That's the son of his favorite wife, the only one he has left. Take me. Now, when we talk about next week's portion, we get into how this is where, Joseph softens, like he was already soft because he was already weeping, but he was going through this strategic process to do testing, to do readiness, to find out the hearts of whatever. But Benjamin being this enigma to people, like not one to me. I personally see Benjamin now. So Benjamin, what is Benjamin? Now, I would say that throughout the land of Israel, and I know this personally, I have been there a bunch of times, and I have talked to, discussed, seen, and gone places where it is not unusual for a lot of the people there that you wouldn't think would believe Messiah ben Joseph's already come and we await Messiah ben David. Like, that's not uncommon. I know that might be a mystery to you or like unknown to you. And who are these people in this generation? So many of them that understand Messiah ben Joseph has been here. Benjamin. Because Judah sacrifices himself to come and get Benjamin. That to me is so significant, and so many points in this story. If I had a lot more time to unpack it, and we might do that, like I said, if we do a part 2, which we will, we'll do a part 2 next week's portion. We're going to touch on stuff this week, but that's, to me, that is Benjamin, right? That's who Benjamin is. This is Judah loving the father more than he hated the brother, like the prodigal son. Remember? The older brother's like, why are you, slaughtering this calf and making this covenant meal with the son who just demanded his inheritance, left? I've been always with you, and I have to set the table for him. And the father's like, I love my son, and you have been by my side. Sure. True. What should matter to you, though, isn't anything about your brother. It's about me. What should matter is me first. If I thought my son was dead and he's alive, that's all you should care about. Is my joy that my son is not dead. He's been resurrected. So I'm going to run out to meet him. Right? I'm going to run to meet him. So is Benjamin, right? So is that figure of Benjamin. But what does Judah do? He's like, listen, I am not going to watch my father grieve. I've already grieved him. I knew I should have gone in the pit and rescued Joseph. I should have done that. In his distress, where he begged me to grab onto him, I didn't do it. And so I'll take the place. So I would say a lot of the people in the land that do not believe in Messiah ben Yosef has come already. And we're waiting for Messiah ben David. Benjamin will be their link. Benjamin, right? Those that understand that there's that link. The southern kingdom with Judah, Torah believing, practicing, right? With this northern kingdom, with this disguised Joseph, right? With this disguise I didn't recognize. But the unity of, I care more about dad than anything else. The joy of the Lord is my strength. And he thought of the joy of his father, and that made him strong enough to say, take me. Do not deprive my father of what he loves. And so next week, we're going to talk from an attachment perspective about the forgiveness of Joseph and all that. That's a big deal, and that's its own whole thing. But I wanted to set this up because when we talk about this, I want you to feel, right? That story was so wordy, right? There's just so many things to unpack with it, with the way that Joseph didn't even, he was so non-straightforward about the way he dealt with them. But in the end, when we read it, we know why he did what he did. He did testing. He did fleshing out, to find out what was in their character, to find out what was in their heart, to find out who was he to them. Was he just erased? No, he wasn't erased. But they acknowledged that they didn't move to grab him when they should have. And so this prophetic, intelligent, good-looking, amazing Joseph, right? He has these children that signify prophetically that I have found joy here in Egypt and forgotten my father's house, right? That's one of the things that he is so important, right? In the land of my affliction, he's still addressing that he has been afflicted. And so you see those boys like represent what's happening now, I think. This is a reckoning of sorts. This is a time when you're seeing Judah is going to come for Benjamin. And in the process of coming for Benjamin, he doesn't recognize Joseph yet. But when that costume comes off, which is, I think, what you're seeing with a lot of these other brothers, they're starting to peel off the costume of Egypt. And they're starting to recognize, wait a minute, that's Joseph? But to get into that place of power, that double portion that Joseph had, this was found in Egypt, in the cities. It's the word for cities is politics, right? It's found through this stuff. That's how we find Joseph. But Joseph, when he came from the prison, he had to look like an Egyptian. And he did. And he married an Egyptian. He became second in power to Egypt. Though Pharaoh was overall at that time. But the reckoning occurred. The reckoning happened because Judah found Joseph. through Benjamin. And so who is Benjamin? I believe it's the people of the land who are connected to Joseph, one of Rachel's kids. That's what I firmly believe. And I think this story tells us that this is now, right now, we are standing ahead of a potential supply shortage. That's something that you hear in the news every single day, constantly in the mainstream news. It's just everywhere. And I've noticed it, right? I've noticed it myself. Well, we're out of time. I want to talk longer, but we are out of time. And so what I want to do is just tell you that the future begins now. Join me for next week as we kind of put this more together. But I've really enjoyed everything about our time today. I'm sorry I went over, but let's talk next time. And we'll get this further going. But I'm so glad I got to talk to you. I can't wait till next week. I'm so excited. Maybe I'll even record it sooner. But until next time, the future begins now. Bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.